What if your DNA could tell you a story more ancient than your surname, more powerful than a myth, and more complex than any single religion? What if it could trace the footsteps of your ancestors through vast empires, across snow-capped mountains, and into the cradle of one of the oldest living civilizations on Earth? This isn't a fantasy. It's the story science is beginning to reveal about the people who identify as Hindus. Now, let's be clear. Hinduism is more than just a religion. It's a way of life, a tapestry of philosophy, ritual, and identity, woven over thousands of years. But who were the people who first lived and breathed this culture? Were they always here in India? Did they come from somewhere else? Did they mix with others? And what secrets lie hidden in their DNA? Recent breakthroughs in genetic research are peeling back the layers of India's deep history, and what they found is both surprising and profound. It's a tale of ancient settlers, mysterious migrations, cultural fusion, and the invisible threads that bind 1 billion people across the vast and varied land of South Asia. In this video, we're going to unravel that story. Not through myth, not through politics, but through hard science. From the mysterious Indus Valley civilization to the legendary Aryans, and from the North-South divide to the deeply rooted caste system, we'll explore how genetic discoveries are rewriting everything we thought we knew about the origins of the Hindu people. So buckle in. The journey we're about to take is thousands of years long, and it starts not in the pages of scripture, but in the double helix of human DNA. Before the sacred chants of the Vedas echoed across the subcontinent, before temples rose and philosophies flourished, the land we now call India was already home to some of the oldest human communities on Earth. To understand the genetic origins of the people who would eventually be called Hindus, we must journey back tens of thousands of years, long before recorded history. The first modern humans arrived in South Asia approximately 65,000 years ago, part of the early wave of human migration out of Africa. These early settlers, often referred to by geneticists as ancient ancestral South Indians, carried a distinct lineage, one that still exists in the DNA of many modern Indians, particularly in the southern parts of the subcontinent. These ancient groups adapted to India's diverse geography, from the lush forests of the Western Ghats to the dry plains of the Deccan Plateau. They developed their own languages, tools, customs, and ways of life. Archaeological finds suggest that these early communities lived in harmony with nature, used microlithic tools, and engaged in rudimentary farming and foraging. Fast forward to around 9,000 years ago, and a major transformation began, the agricultural revolution. One of the earliest farming cultures in South Asia emerged in Mehrgarh, located in modern-day Pakistan. These early farmers domesticated crops, built permanent settlements, and likely influenced what would become the Indus Valley civilization, one of the world's first urban cultures. This is where things get especially interesting. Genetic studies show that the people of the Indus Valley were a complex mix, descended partly from these ancient South Asian hunter-gatherers and partly from Neolithic Iranian farmers who had migrated eastward. This mixing created a new genetic layer, now referred to in research as the Indus periphery component. What's remarkable is that this component shows up across many modern Indian populations. Importantly, this era predates Hinduism as we know it. The Indus Valley people practiced their own religion and rituals, distinct from the Vedic traditions that would come much later. Still, echoes of their beliefs, like reverence for fertility, water, and nature, may have survived and found their way into Hindu thought. By the time the Indus Valley declined around 1900 BCE, due to climate shifts and possible social disruptions, its genetic legacy had already taken root across the region. These were the people who laid the biological and cultural groundwork for what was to come. So, before we even get to the Vedic hymns and deities, India was already a melting pot of deep-time ancestries. From ancient foragers, early farmers, and mysterious urban dwellers, whose bloodlines continue to flow through modern veins. And this is just the beginning, because the next wave of migrants would change the course of South Asian history forever. For decades, the question of the so-called Aryan invasion, or migration, has sparked fierce debate in South Asia, among historians, politicians, and ordinary people alike. Were the ancient Vedic people native to India, or did they arrive from outside? And what role did they play in shaping Hindu culture and Indian identity? Thanks to recent breakthroughs in ancient DNA research, we now have clearer answers, grounded in science rather than speculation. To begin with, the term Aryan itself has often been misunderstood. In the ancient texts, it referred more to a cultural identity and language group than to a specific race. Modern genetic research avoids this loaded word altogether, instead focusing on the movement of people who spoke Indo-European languages, particularly Indo-Aryan, into South Asia. The key turning point came with the analysis of ancient remains from Rakhigarhi, an Indus Valley site, and comparison with remains from the Andronovo and Santashta cultures in the Eurasian steppe, regions north of the Caspian Sea. Geneticists found that the people from the steppe shared a significant genetic component with many northern Indian populations today, especially among upper caste groups and speakers of Indo-Aryan languages. This strongly supports the Aryan migration model, not an invasion, as earlier colonial narratives suggested, but a gradual influx of steppe pastoralist groups around 2000 BCE, after the decline of the Indus Valley civilization. These groups brought with them a distinct steppe ancestry and likely introduced early Vedic rituals, Sanskrit language, and elements of Indo-European cosmology into the subcontinent. But here's the twist: they didn't replace the existing populations. Instead, they intermixed with the descendants of the Indus Valley and earlier groups. The resulting blend created a new layered population, what researchers now call the ancestral North Indians, ANI. This group had both steppe and Iranian farmer ancestry, and they became the major contributors to the genetic makeup of many North Indian communities. Meanwhile, ancestral South Indians, ASI, descendants of ancient hunter-gatherers and Indus Valley people without steppe input, remained more prominent in the South. Over time, gene flow between ANI and ASI groups created the diverse yet interconnected population structure seen in India today. In short, the DNA doesn't lie. The Vedic people were not purely indigenous, nor were they entirely foreign conquerors. They were part of a broader human story of migration, mixing, and transformation. The steppe migrants were one of many threads woven into the subcontinent's human tapestry. What this tells us is powerful. Hinduism and Indian civilization didn't begin with one group or one origin, but from a fusion of cultures, ideas, and bloodlines. Far from weakening the identity, this complexity enriches it. The real story of the Hindu people is not about purity or separation. It's about how movement, connection, and change shaped one of the oldest living traditions in the world. The rise of early Hindu civilization was not the product of a single people or culture. It was a fusion. A blending of three distinct streams flowed into what we now call the Hindu world. The ancient urbanites of the Indus Valley, the pastoral steppe people who brought Indo-Aryan languages, and the deeply rooted tribal communities spread across the subcontinent. Together, they formed the bedrock of one of the most enduring cultural systems in human history. Let's begin with the Indus Valley civilization, often called Harappan civilization. Flourishing from around 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE, it was one of the most advanced societies of the ancient world. The Indus people built cities with underground drainage, practiced sophisticated agriculture, and traded as far as Mesopotamia. Though their script remains undeciphered, their artifacts suggest strong spiritual practices, reverence for nature, and symbolic use of fire and water, elements that echo later Hindu rituals. Then came the Indo-Aryans, steppe pastoralists from Central Asia, who began entering northwestern India after the decline of the Indus cities. Unlike earlier colonial portrayals of violent conquest, modern research, including archaeology and DNA, suggests their arrival was gradual and not entirely disruptive. They brought their Sanskrit language, Vedic chants, and ritual-based cosmology. Their contribution laid the foundation of the Vedas, which became central to early Hindu philosophy. But neither the Aryans nor the Indus people existed in isolation. Across the forests, hills, and plains of India lived countless tribal communities, some predating even the Indus Valley civilization. These groups had their own animistic beliefs, totemic systems, goddess worship, and oral traditions. Far from being erased or sidelined, Many of these traditions merged into mainstream Hinduism. The worship of local deities, fertility cults, and earth-centered rituals were absorbed, localized, and celebrated within the broader Hindu framework. This blending wasn't just spiritual, it was social and genetic too. Studies show that the people of the subcontinent intermarried over centuries, creating a complex and layered population. No single group dominated the gene pool. Rather, it was a gradual synthesis of Indus-related ancestry, steppe ancestry, and indigenous tribal ancestry. By 1000 BCE, this fusion had created the mosaic of early Indian society, with rich regional variation but also shared cultural touchstones. Even today, you can see the fingerprints of this blending. Vedic gods like Agni and Indra coexist with ancient fertility goddesses in rural shrines. Sacred hymns in Sanskrit are recited beside folk songs passed down orally in tribal dialects. Hindu epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata bear traces of both Indo-Aryan heroic tradition and indigenous storytelling. Forms. In truth, Hinduism is not a monolith. It's a grand tapestry woven over millennia. The soul of the civilization was shaped by interaction, not isolation, by exchange, not erasure. The Indus builders, the Vedic sages, and the tribal storytellers all had a hand in it. And this complex heritage is what gives Hinduism its unmatched depth, diversity, and staying power. One of the most defining and controversial aspects of Hindu society is the caste system. While its roots are complex and often debated, genetic research has begun to uncover just how deeply caste has shaped the biological history of the Indian subcontinent. What scientists have found is both fascinating and sobering. For centuries, social structure didn't just influence how people lived. It also shaped who they married, and in turn, how their DNA evolved. The origins of caste-like divisions can be traced back to the early Vedic period, when society was loosely divided into four varnas: Brahmins, priests; Kshatriyas, warriors; Vaishyas, traders; and Shudras, laborers. Initially, these categories were likely fluid and functional, roles people played rather than fixed identities. But over time, these distinctions hardened into birth-based hierarchies. With this shift came endogamy, the practice of marrying within one's caste. Modern genetics confirms this social rigidity left a clear mark on DNA. In a groundbreaking study published in the journal Nature in 2013, researchers analyzed the genomes of thousands of Indians from different caste and tribal groups. What they discovered was striking. Starting around 2,000 years ago, gene flow between groups dropped dramatically. In simple terms, people stopped intermarrying across caste lines. This period coincides with the crystallization of caste boundaries in religious texts and law codes like the Manusmriti. The result of this centuries-long endogamy is a level of genetic stratification that's among the strongest in the world. Brahmin populations across India, from Tamil Nadu to Kashmir, show more genetic similarity to each other than to their non-Brahmin neighbors. Likewise, many lower caste and tribal groups remain genetically isolated, forming distinct genetic communities with limited outside mixing. This isn't just about DNA either, it affects health. Because people married within small groups for generations, certain hereditary diseases and genetic disorders became more common in specific castes. Medical researchers now see caste-related patterns in conditions like thalassemia, lactose intolerance, and even rare metabolic disorders. Understanding these patterns is becoming crucial for improving public health strategies across India. But perhaps the most powerful revelation from this genetic research is that caste, though socially imposed, was not a natural or ancient feature of Indian life. The deep genetic mixing that occurred before 100 CE between populations with both Indus Valley and steppe ancestry and tribal communities shows that early Indian society was far more integrated than later systems would suggest. The rigid caste-based separation came much later, and it left an artificial imprint that lasted for centuries. Today, as more Indians explore their ancestry through DNA testing, some are rediscovering forgotten lineages, connections to tribal groups, ancient migrants, or other regions of the subcontinent. It's a reminder that behind the visible caste system lies a deeper, shared heritage. The story of caste isn't just one of division. It's also a window into how culture can shape biology, and how, through science, we can begin to unravel the threads of identity, inequality, and belonging, one genome at a time. In India, it's easy to assume that people from the north and the south are genetically worlds apart. Differences in language, skin tone, traditions, and even cuisine often reinforce that perception. But when scientists began to analyze Indian genomes more closely, they found something surprising. Under the surface, North and South Indians share far more than meets the eye. At the heart of this discovery is the concept of ancestral North Indians, ANI, and ancestral South Indians, ASI, two major genetic lineages identified by geneticists in the early 21st century. The ANI are thought to be related to populations in Central Asia, the Middle East, and the steppe, while the ASI represent more ancient, deeply rooted groups indigenous to the subcontinent. These two lineages mixed, in varying proportions, across India thousands of years ago. Northern Indians, on average, tend to have a higher proportion of ANI ancestry, while Southern Indians generally have more ASI ancestry. But here's the twist. Every single Indian population studied, so far, is a mix of both. This means the genetic boundary between North and South is not a wall, it's more like a gradient. Even in Tamil Nadu, you'll find genes linked to the steppe migrations. And in Kashmir, there are clear signals of deep, indigenous ASI roots. This genetic blend didn't happen overnight. It reflects a long and complicated history of intermarriage, migration, trade, and cultural exchange. Some of the earliest farming communities in India, around 7,000 years ago, already showed signs of mixed ancestry. Over millennia, people moved through the subcontinent, carrying their languages, tools, and DNA with them. Geography, politics, and religion might have shaped where people settled, but the genes kept flowing. Recent studies using ancient DNA, like the famous Rakhigarhi skeleton from the Indus Valley, have shown that Indus Valley populations were already genetically diverse, mixing both ASI-like and Iranian farmer ancestry long before the supposed Aryan migration. In other words, the groundwork for today's Indian genetic landscape was laid far earlier than many assume. And while caste and regional identities later created social divisions, the underlying genetic story tells a tale of shared ancestry. Many South Indians might trace part of their ancestry to ancient northern migrants, and vice versa. The genetic evidence often contradicts the idea of two completely separate populations evolving in isolation. Importantly, genetic overlap doesn't mean everyone is the same, but it does mean we're more connected than we think. While certain groups may have more or less of one ancestral component, no Indian group exists in a vacuum. Even tribal populations, once thought to be genetically pure, have been found to carry genes from across the spectrum of Indian ancestry. So, the next time someone insists that North and South Indians are biologically distinct, remember, underneath the surface, there's a shared story written in our DNA. It's a story of movement mixing and common roots stretching back thousands of years. And it's far more unifying than most would ever guess. In the 21st century, the field of genetics has opened a powerful window into the past, helping us understand not just where our ancestors came from, but how we are all connected. When scientists began studying the modern Hindu population's DNA, they found a rich, intricate genetic mosaic shaped by thousands of years of migration, mixing, and culture. Today, the average Hindu individual carries a unique blend of multiple ancestral components, the most prominent being the ancestral North Indian, ANI, and ancestral South Indian, ASI, lineages. As mentioned earlier, ANI is linked to ancient Central Asians, Iranian farmers, and steppe pastoralists, while ASI is deeply rooted in the indigenous tribal populations of the Indian subcontinent. However, the story doesn't stop with these two groups. Recent genomic studies have revealed traces of Southeast Asian, Tibetan, Austroasiatic, and Dravidian ancestries in various Hindu communities. These genetic inputs reflect ancient trade routes, cross-cultural marriages, tribal integration, and the slow but steady march of civilization across the subcontinent. Caste and regional affiliations, which have historically played a major role in shaping Hindu society, are also visible in the genome. Endogamy, or marrying within one's caste or community, was practiced for over 2,000 years, and it has left a clear imprint in Hindu DNA. Certain genetic markers are highly concentrated in specific caste groups, and these patterns help scientists trace migration paths, social structures, and even the origins of hereditary diseases in modern populations. Interestingly, modern genetic analyses show that despite rigid social structures, Hindu populations have shared ancestry across caste lines. This challenges long-held assumptions about purity and separation, highlighting instead a long history of shared origin followed by social stratification. Furthermore, genetic diversity within Hindu groups often surpasses that of entire European countries. For example, a Hindu from Bengal might be genetically closer to a Nepalese hill tribe than to a Hindu from Kerala. This diversity showcases how geography, climate isolation, and social norms created distinct genetic pockets, even within a single religion. Another fascinating insight is the genetic continuity between modern Hindus and ancient populations like the Indus Valley Civilization. Ancient DNA from Harappan sites shows significant overlap with today's northern and western Indian Hindu communities. This suggests that Hinduism, though formally codified much later, emerged from a very old cultural and genetic foundation. In urban centers today, with increasing inter-caste and inter-regional marriages, the genetic lines are blending once again. Modern Hindus are becoming more genetically diverse than ever before, reversing thousands of years of endogamy. Scientists are watching this new chapter unfold in real time. Ultimately, the modern Hindu genome tells a story of ancient complexity, resilience, and shared human experience. It reminds us that behind every ritual, every temple, and every festival lies an epic journey of ancestry stretching back tens of thousands of years, written not only in sacred texts, but in the very code of life itself. For centuries, Hindu identity has been shaped by language, scriptures, tradition, and region. But in recent decades, science, especially genetics, has added a powerful new layer to the story. DNA research has not only confirmed much of what history and archaeology suggested, but it has also challenged some long-held beliefs, helping us see Hindu identity in a new, more unified light. At its heart, Hinduism is not a single religion, but a vast, evolving way of life shaped by many peoples, languages, and belief systems. From Vedic chants in the north to temple rituals in the south, and from tribal worship in forests to the philosophical texts of ancient sages, Hindu culture is a mosaic of influences. For a long time, this cultural variety was thought to reflect separate racial or ethnic origins. But genetic studies have shown that, beneath all the differences, there is shared ancestry, deep and ancient. The blending of ancestral North Indian ANI and ancestral South Indian ASI lineages, for example, is not just a genetic detail. It tells a story of migration, cooperation, and intermarriage. These genetic components mixed long before modern notions of caste and region took root. Science shows us that the division between Aryan and Dravidian, or between so-called pure and mixed bloodlines, has no clear-cut basis in biology. Instead, there is continuous gene flow across centuries, connecting people from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Even the caste system, often viewed as a rigid barrier between communities, now appears more as a social construct than a biological truth. Genetic evidence proves that all caste groups, upper and lower, share common ancestors. This doesn't erase the social realities of caste discrimination, but it does remind us that, genetically, we are more alike than we are different. This scientific understanding has important implications for Hindu identity today. It suggests that being Hindu is not about belonging to a single ethnic group or having a specific bloodline. It's about participating in a shared cultural and spiritual heritage that has grown from countless interactions over thousands of years. Whether someone's ancestors were Vedic priests, Indus Valley traders, tribal shamans, or steppe nomads, they all contributed to what we now call Hindu civilization. Moreover, science is helping rediscover forgotten threads of Hindu ancestry. DNA links are revealing connections between modern Indians and ancient populations from Central Asia, Iran, and even Southeast Asia. These findings are not threats to Hindu identity, they enrich it. They show that Hinduism has always been open, absorbing, and dynamic, not closed off or narrowly defined. In a world where identity is increasingly politicized, genetic science brings a refreshing dose of reality. It grounds our understanding of ourselves not in myths of purity or superiority, but in a shared, beautifully complex human story. Redefining Hindu identity through science doesn't mean erasing tradition. It means expanding our view of it, embracing both the diversity and unity encoded in our very DNA.